Thanks, Julie. Thanks, my Jewish learning. And thank you, Danny. It's really cool to be back on a hot air Zoom balloon. And welcome, everyone. It's so good to see all of you. And I can kind of, from that little chat, I think quite a few of you are from South Africa and Cape Town. So that's great. I'm quickly just going to share my screen and over here. And I hope you can all understand my accent. No, I'm just joking. Everyone loves a South African accent. Okay, so just to introduce myself, Danny, that was an excellent introduction. I feel like I don't have to introduce myself, but I will. So I'm Craig. I am from Johannesburg and now live in Cape Town. And the reason why I started these Jewish tours is because I was working at the Cape South African Jewish Board of Deputies, which I am doing. I'm currently back there since about 8 weeks ago. And it was the 175th anniversary of the founding of the Jewish community in Cape Town and South Africa. And I thought, wow, this is the perfect opportunity to actually give people the insights and how Jews actually came to South Africa. And I just thought, why not start? Actually, it was my wife's suggestion because wives always have the best ideas and Gabby's amazing. So I just thought, wow, this is such a great opportunity to give people this understanding about why we are here today. And so I started my The City Jewish Tours. So first up, Danny, is there any way that when the thing comes up, I don't see that 3 people have entered the waiting room?
I will let Julie handle that. I think it's possible to perhaps demote you to not be a co-host, but maybe you won't be able to share a screen. Maybe keep going for now, and then we'll try and work that out.
I'll keep going. That's fine. Okay, so basically, this is just, first of all, this is me and my wife, Gabby. She's beautiful. And this is at Garden Shore. This is where we actually got married on our wedding day. Obviously, at the back there, you can see Table Mountain. Glorious, glorious background.
Ooh, and Craig, I don't know if this is happening with other people, but I haven't seen the slide change yet. It's still for me showing Mother City Jewish Tours. I hope that's really just for me and not for other people. But maybe close it and try and open.
Can you see something now?
For me, I still see, it doesn't seem like other people are seeing it either. So let's probably close and then start it again, and we will go take it from the top. Yep, now we got it. Now we got it.
Okay, I'm just not gonna expand it. If I expand it, just, can you see any change?
Nope, it looks the same. Looks the same.
Can you see a change? Okay, cool.
It's perfect the way it is now.
Love technical issues. Awesome. So I'm just going to keep it like this then. All right. So in the background is Table Mountain over there, and this is Garden Shore. It is absolutely beautiful. And basically, I'm just going to speak a little bit about some of the aspects of Cape Town first. So over here in the background, coming up, this is beautiful Cape Town. And actually, we've just had our local government elections, so voting for our different municipalities in South Africa. And Cape Town is, we just voted in Cape Town. We've got the opposition, official opposition in South Africa has once again become the leaders or the majority party in Cape Town, and it's very, very different to the rest of South Africa. But over here you can see the whole of Cape Town, absolutely beautiful. Over here is Lion's Head, and that's Devil's Peak, and I'll be speaking a little bit about Devil's Peak later, which is quite exciting. But let's just carry on. South Africa's got an incredible history, and I just want to take you through some of the historical aspects about Cape Town before we delve into the Jewish aspect itself. So what we've got over here is a not very great picture of someone called Jan van Riebeeck landing in the Cape with this Dutch flag over here. And over here is an indigenous person. So Jan van Riebeeck comes to South Africa and establishes a refreshment station in 1652. And basically, from 1652 until 1994, South Africa does not allow any participation from either indigenous people. You can see here are the Khoi, and later become the Khoisan, or African or South African Black people. And that begins in 1652 with the Dutch coming into power. And so the Dutch really, or the Dutch East Indies Company back then, created created Cape Town itself, but also created the history that we had until the end of apartheid, and still lingers on in spatial apartheid and in so much juxtaposition between the rich and the poor in Cape Town and South Africa. And I always want to bring that to people's attention, just because it's so important when looking at South Africa from an historical and a political and socioeconomic background. When Jan van Riebeeck comes and the Dutch arrive, they build this. It's called the Castle of Good Hope. Actually, it's a bit of a misnomer. It was a fort that they built. The original fort actually was something else, but this is what it looks like. It's one of two pentagonal military bases in the world. The other's the Pentagon. Originally, the entrance to this was over here, but because this road actually wasn't there, this was all surrounded by sea. There was a massive reclamation project that took place between the 1920s and the 1940s, and basically Cape Town was completely changed, but the castle remained, and the entrance to the castle was created in 1666 over here, as you can see in this next slide over here. But this over here is the slave lodge. So in 1652, there were no slaves in South Africa, or the Cape rather, and the governor of the Cape was not allowed to enslave the indigenous people, but they realized that they had to get slaves because white people can't do any work. And so willingly, I kept on telling that when I was a teacher to my seventh graders, and I don't know what their parents thought of that. Anyway, so slaves came in 1654. And I always say, why I bring this up is because we're reminded every single day in our prayers that we have to remember to be grateful that we are not slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt. And I always bring this up because I think it's so important to understand the diversity and the background of South African history. And again, this disparity between the rich and the poor, that's always been there. So here we've got the slave lodge, and slaves were brought here off the ship. Their names and identities were taken away from them, and they either had biblical names like David's, like Abram's, like Jacob's, or they had names of the month like February, January, December, and that they were brought in. And these names, interestingly enough, are still used as surnames by people who are descendants of slaves.
Craig, quick question as you're Dave, just a quick question. Where were do you happen to know where the slaves were brought in from?
So the slaves were brought in from the East Indies. So the Dutch East India Company came from, its bases were Amsterdam. It later became Cape Town, but its main base in the East was in Batavia, which is now Indonesia. So slaves came from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Madagascar, and even some from Mozambique, but mostly from around that, I'm going to do this, I think it's on your side, I don't know, from the East India, the East Indian Ocean region. So those are where most of the slaves come from, and we call Cape Coloreds, and I know that colored is a bit derogative in America, but colored is a person of mixed race, and so the Cape Colored community is actually quite a vibrant community, and they are those descendants, and we sometimes call them Cape Malay culture, and so that's where they're from. So thanks for the question, Danny. And when it comes to this was the slave lodge, how it looked back in the 1650s, these windows over here were basically never open for the slaves, and neither were these. It was completely dark inside. This well over here in the middle, they could only come to it once for 1 hour in the day, and at night, in the from 1650s until the abolition of slavery by the British in 1806. Men from the Dutch East Indies Company could come and rape women and have their way with them at 9 o'clock at night. And really a terrible, terrible history and blight on South African, on the South African political and just historical landscape. But we've now got this building, which is the slave lodge over here. And the slave lodge, obviously, before or during apartheid, this wasn't a museum dedicated to the history of slavery. In fact, it was the Museum of Culture. And my wife remembers coming to it and seeing doll collections and all of that kind of stuff. And obviously, the apartheid government did not want people to understand the history of slavery in the past. But we do today. And if you are ever in Cape Town, or if you're watching in South Africa, you have to come to this amazing museum. And it just gives you such an incredible sense of, and terrible sense, terrifying of what happened. And I know that America obviously has its share of slave history. And it's really, really fascinating, terrible, but something we need to be aware of. Anyway, moving on from slavery, I'm going to talk about how our community was actually born and the history of Tikvat Yisrael. So over here, the Jewish, I'm going to be speaking about the Jewish community. Sorry for my face over here. Also, in the background, you'll hear some water. It's there for, let's say, a relaxing environment. So just listen to me over here. Community has its roots right here at the house of a person called Benjamin Norden. Now, Benjamin Norden came from the Eastern Cape. He came from Grahamstown. There's a whole bit of history about how the British actually came to the Cape in 1806. They colonized it. I'm not going to go into details. However, Benjamin Norden saw the need to come to Cape Town itself, and with 16 other men, he founded Tikvat Yisrael, the Hope of Israel, on Erev Yom Kippur in 1841. Now, Benjamin Norden was, as I say, a caustic individual. He wasn't very well liked, but this was the home that he had established in Cape Town, and this is where Tikvat Yisrael and the Jewish community as a whole stems from 1841 until now, 2021. This is where it comes from. Cool. So that is literally where it comes from. It was that house in Hoff Street, which is now part of a beautiful hotel, the Nelson, the Mount Nelson Hotel, which you can go to. It's called the Pink Lady. Anyway, so right here in front of me is the place of the first synagogue in South Africa. It was called the Bouquet Street Synagogue, and the community was growing. It needed to have a place, an established and formal place of worship. And so the Bouquet Street Synagogue was formed, and the first leader of the congregation was a guy called Reverend Isaac Pulver, and he was there from 1849 to 1851. Not a very long time indeed. And he really didn't like it. And the reason is, and I just have to read you this, he wasn't a really nice individual. And I'll just show you what he looked like. This is what he looks like, very stern man. And basically he said, he resigned after 2 years, and he said, "My principal reasons for wishing to leave this congregation are, first, that I cannot get kosher meat. Secondly, that I cannot, as a Jewish parent, bring up my children in a place where so little regard is paid to the principles of our holy religion. And thirdly, that notwithstanding nearly 2 years' trial to live as economically as possible, I could not make my income meet my expenses." So really not a happy chappy. this Reverend Pulver. And Danny, last time there were questions about why he was called Reverend, and I'm sure
That's
all
right.
of you are wondering.
It's
So
you just guessed about 20 questions that I just received direct by now.
yes. Haha. So basically, my colleague is the doyen of history and in South Africa, and she told me that a reverend in Britain, the chief rabbi of Great Britain, didn't want to bestow the title of rabbi onto anyone else who was not himself. And so he called all of the other rabbis reverends, even the dayans, even the heads of kashrut and halacha, he called reverends. And so when this guy, Reverend Pulver, was brought in from England, as these were Anglo-Jews, he was called reverend. And that is how he became reverend. And we get reverends until Eastern European Jews come and don't actually conform to the Anglo-Jewish model of Jewish religion. And only in the 1937, we get Rabbi Joel Rabinowitz, who becomes a rabbi in his own right. So fascinating history.
A quick question for you, Craig. At the time, was it confusing for the people? Like, were there Christian reverends, but then Jewish reverends at that time? They both had the same term?
I don't think it was confusing. I mean, there was one community. It was really just
pretty
one
small
place where they could go to. So it was pretty small at that time. And also the community ebbed and flowed. And eventually but in 1851, he leaves, and the community goes through quite a lot of economic woes, but also highs. And in 1863, they grow into a larger community, and eventually they move into this place, which is now we call it the Small Shore. It's also the place of the South African Jewish Museum, which is housed, and this is in 1863. And it becomes really the place of worship until the Great Synagogue of Cape Town is built in 1905. So these are just some of the things of what it looks like inside. This is where the Ark was. And this is, you can see up there, the ladies section, which was some of the questions. You can see over here, this is where the congregation would sit. This is the bima. And it's actually a beautiful museum if you come to Cape Town itself. Now, what I'm showing you now is the Garden Shore and the Great Synagogue of Cape Town, the crown, the jewel in the crown of all of Cape Jewish architecture, I guess. And this is Garden Shore itself. And it's really, really beautiful and stunning. This is where I got married. And it is really where my wife's family came from. It was built and it was really created to create aspects of showing that Jewish South Africans or Jews in the Cape were there to stay. And you can see how beautiful this is over here. This is the bima. Behind is this beautiful mosaic with gold, and it was just absolutely, here is where the choir would sing, and it's really phenomenal. This is the bima. I was the choir director at Garden Shore myself, and just singing from that choir. From that bima over there, the acoustics were absolutely incredible. Also from that bima, both my daughters were named over there. I've got two little girls, a 6-year-old Jessica Rose and a 3-year-old Livy Ray, and they both absolutely wonderful. And they were named on that very bima over there. And all around you can see proteas, and proteas are the national flower of South Africa. And you can really see that the Jewish community, and I love this over here, how you can see this beautiful dome, and it really shows how incredible this shore actually is. So this was the Garden Shore. This was the British or Anglo-Jewish community. But it changes, the landscape of Jews changes quite significantly, and I'm going to show you why it does in this. In the 1880s, in the Russian Empire, we start seeing the pogroms occurring. Now, it wasn't the Jews just moving to America that happened when 2.5 million Jews moved to America. During that time, Lithuanian Jews, or what would become Lithuanian Jews, came to South Africa via boats, via the Royal Mail ships, and they came to the docks. They were met at the docks as they disembarked by a family member, a friend, or just a good Samaritan, and they were brought into District 6 to try to find a job. If they weren't looking for a job to come into the Cape, they were trying to find a job up in Johannesburg, the new Golden Medina, where the Jews came to try to make a living via mining gold. We're not talking about that right now. Instead, Jews came here to become upwardly mobile through becoming peddlers, or what we call a smos. And by becoming upwardly mobile, they started moving up the mountain out of District 6 or towards Sea Point, which is a major area or a hub of where Jews are today. But when we're looking at District 6, it was a melting pot of nations. Freed slaves used to come to District 6 after they were freed. We also had a lot of black Africans who came to the Cape and couldn't find a place to live if they didn't want to live in what we now see as the townships. And Jews came here too, because they were not rich. They were poor, obviously, as we see from the Lower East Side of Manhattan or the East End of London. They established many synagogues and Talmud Torahs in District 6. But it wasn't just the poor who used to come here. Instead, also, we get the intelligentsia. And the intelligentsia used to come and meet at this spot behind me. It was called Bankenstadt's bookseller. Today it's called Charlie's Bakery, as you can see. Very popular bakery in Cape Town, owned by a Jewish family still. Actually, a lot of the buildings around here are still owned by Jews. Not strangely enough, interestingly enough. And what happened was the intelligentsia met here, and they spoke about all kinds of things Jewish and interesting. And this is where Jewish culture, predominantly our Eastern European culture, came, and then they started to mix with our British culture. And I'll speak a little bit about that later on when we speak about what Jews are like in South Africa today. Cool, so that's basically some facts about District 6, but I want to tell you about the apartheid side of District 6, and the apartheid government, or even the Cape government earlier in the 1900s, saw District 6 as quite an undesirable place. And I'm just going to read you something that was written in 1908 by the Cape. And it says, "The impression that will prevail in my mind is rows of shabby and unclean shops whose walls and signboards are sprinkled with Yiddish characters, sloping streets crowded with colored people, Indians, Russians, and Poles, narrow lanes where little black and brown babies tumble amidst the discarded rags and the empty canisters flung out of the houses. I recall the glimpses of indescribable dirt and squalor that I had through open doors and windows. The group of men that stared around the counters of the tailors and the jewelers holding debates in Yiddish. The lean and ragged little children that rush from miserable and secret lanes into the crowded streets, or crawl out of the doors of the mean houses to stretch their bare brown limbs in the dry gutters. The hard white faces of the wives and the daughters of the hunted Russians, sitting on shabby balconies or lounging against shop doors." Not a pretty picture painted of District 6, but it really was, like I said in the video, a melting pot of where people came, ex-slaves, as well as poor Jews and people who needed to live there. In 1966, we start getting, in the 1960s, the apartheid government begins forced removals of black and colored people in desirable areas for white people. 1960 in Sapphire Town in Johannesburg is the first one, and it becomes Triumph. In Afrikaans, it means triumph. And in South Africa, in Cape Town, in District 6, between 1966 and 1976, District 6 is summarily razed to the ground, except for places of worship. So no mosques or churches. And remember that shuls are just buildings. They are not necessarily places of worship. So the shuls, even if they were there, were no longer places that needed to be that needed to stand, and they were moved and they were forced to the townships, where it is absolutely awful today. But the Jewish history remains, and the Jews from there moved either up into the mountain, into the nice suburbs, leafy suburbs, or into Sea Point, where majority Jews live today. But from District 6, they come to really become entrepreneurs and try to start being a business, becoming business people, businessmen, more often than not. And we've got this place, the Grand Parade in Cape Town. And this is what it looked like on market day. And the Grand Parade was really an incredible marketplace. What happened was that Jews from District 6, or Jews, would come and become peddlers, and they would move or buy things from the market and take them into the country communities like Oudtshoorn, like Willemore, and other places that in the interior of the Cape, in the hinterland of the Cape, sell them to the Jewish families over there, as well as non-Jewish families, and come back to the market, to the Grand Parade, and begin the whole process again. And this is where it is. And this is a picture taken over here of what it actually looked like in the early 1900s. And I just think that this is absolutely wonderful to see over here. But as always, there are still periods of anti-alienism in South Africa. And in 1897, I have to read you this, because it really shows something. And it's in the Owl, which was a notorious anti-Semitic newspaper. And here is what it said. Saturday by Saturday, the grand, heaven save the word, parade gets worse. The rotten trash that is put upon the sails there would be a disgrace to Petticoat Lane. Not only this, but the trade is now largely carried out by Polish Jews who import, no doubt from other Polish Jews in London, the commonest offscourings of Houndsditch goods. Then these greasy, frowsy gentry stand around and sum up things until whoever purchases is sure to be heartlessly swindled. The fact is, Cape Town at the present time is full of those Polish Jew hawkers who live in dirtier styles than what the K word, which would be the N word in America, live in dirtier styles than the K word, and existing on about half a crown a week each, who rob the tradesman of his due. They don't pay rent, rates, or taxes, yet they are allowed to sell goods just the same as if they kept a reputable store. Respectable Europeans should order these people from their doors. That is the only way to put these people down. Let them do manual work. So, a lovely period in South African history in terms of anti-alienism, but it doesn't stop the fact that Jews kept on becoming successful in South Africa. And so we've got this over here, and the impact of Jews in Cape Town and how we become upwardly mobile. So we've got this man, his name is Saul Solomon, coming up. And to me, I think he looks like a hobbit. And he was from this place in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, really slap bash in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, called St. Helena. Does anyone, I asked this last time, does anyone know why St. Helena is an important place? No?
No.
Cool. I'll tell you that.
I'm answering for the 500 plus people. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, all 530 of you. So The reason is that it's important is because Napoleon died there. Some people say of stomach cancer, other people say of poison. Anyway, so Saul Solomon was born there. His parents thought he was very short because of the perhaps poor air there. So they sent him through to South Africa or to the Cape. And although he didn't grow, he grew in political and economic stature. And he was quite an incredible man when it came to things. He established, this building is called the Old Mutual Building. He established the South African Mutual Life Assurance Trust. And this building was actually the tallest building in the Cape until in the 1920s. And it is absolutely incredible if you ever come to Cape Town. But the South African Mutual Life Assurance Trust, or Old Mutual, was one of the things that Saul Solomon created with 4 other men. And he also started the Cape Argus, which is the longest running newspaper in South Africa, and was also a massively important politician who started South Africa's parliament or representative democracy back in the 1870s. However, the reason I bring this to your attention is because it just shows the indomitable spirits of South African or Jews in general and their entrepreneurial spirit. And a census was taken in 1910 about how where people worked, and 40% of Jews said they were self-employed. And it just shows you that entrepreneurial spirit runs in our vein. And we have retail, banking, hospitality that are linked and can be traced back to Jewish families. And also still today, we have our digital world that is still massively influenced by the Jewish community. And we really have built the economy. And a funny anecdote is that in the 1910s, when the Johannesburg Stock Exchange first began, on Yom Kippur, the stock exchange closed because it could not run without the Jewish businessmen who were there. But we've also got some political impact. So I'm going to show you this beautiful building. This is City Hall. It was built in 1905, or well, it was established in 1905. It is British, and you can see it is imposing. It shows that we are here to stay. And the reason why is right there. It was in the Grand Parade, right by the Castle of Good Hope. After the Anglo-Boer War, the South African War, you get the British coming and really stating that they are here to stay, that they would not leave what would become the Union of South Africa, a different USA, the Union of South Africa, until the 1960s, when South Africa became a republic, and this imposing building became City Hall. And interestingly enough, the person who opened City Hall was none other than the first Jewish mayor of Cape Town, Hyman Liberman. And I think I've got a picture in the next slide. Yes, this is Hyman Liberman. Hyman Liberman was the first mayor of Cape Town, Jewish mayor of Cape Town rather, from 1904 to 1907. And he was one of the first of 15 Jewish mayors, the last being Patricia Kreiner in 1993 to 1995. And she really was the last one during the time of Mandela's presidency. So that's really cool. And here are just some more visuals of City Hall, and you can see that it is a beautiful building. And it just shows our political impact in Cape Town. But not only that, we also had a political impact in South Africa. Now, these are the Houses of Parliament. Danny, you must let me know when I'm running out of time. These are the Houses of Parliament. And South African, pardon?
Plenty time. You're doing awesome. Great, great, great job.
Yes. Okay, cool. So these are the Houses of Parliament over here. And South African Jews played a massive role in politics in general, but we also had some part to play in the political scene in the actual political scene in South Africa. One of the most prominent South African political figures was a woman with the name of Helen Suzman. And she was from the Progressive Party, who was adamant that the apartheid government should not exist. She was part of many movements, and she visited Mandela many times on Robben Island. And she a stern opposer of H.F. Verwoerd, who she described as the scariest person in Parliament. He was the architect of apartheid. That was his nickname. And Helen Suzman is a legend in the South African Jewish community. After apartheid ended, we still get Jewish parliamentarians coming in. An especially important one was Ben Turek, who was part of the ANC, the African National Congress, and part of the struggle itself. However, today, more Jews are aligned with the Democratic Alliance, or who are the official opposition. And we've got two Jews in parliament, Michael Bagram and Darren Bergman, and some Jews in the actual city council of Cape Town itself. So parliament, an incredible history, and the gardens that the parliament stands on, just next to it is Garden Shul. So it shows you the proximity between the two is kind of representative of how safe South African Jews felt at the time when the shul was built, which I think is pretty amazing. Anyway, so this is about apartheid and segregation. I'm going to play a short video for you now. Behind me is St. George's Cathedral. Now, I'm not here to tell you about the Anglican Church and the headquarters of it in South Africa, but instead I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the struggle against apartheid by the Jews. Why I'm telling you at this particular place is that it's actually where Desmond Tutu was the Archbishop for many, many years, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984. Although a controversial character in the Jewish community, as his stance on Israel might be a little bit controversial, he's still considered one of the great stalwarts of the struggle today. And when we're looking at Jews during apartheid, one of the best examples I can give is that of the Rivonia trial. The Rivonia trial, for those of you who don't know what it is, was a trial which accused 13 members of the ANC underground of treason. It's called the Rivonia trial because where they found the underground ANC members was in a place which is incorporated into Johannesburg now called Rivonia. This was in 1963. In it, 4 Jews were accused of being part of the ANC underground, which they were. The prosecutor for the Rivonia trial was Percy Utah, a Jew, and 2 of the defense lawyers were Jews. One, Arthur Chaskelson, who later became the Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, the other being Howard Joffe. You can see how the Jewish community was on the spectrum. There were some Jews who did nothing, but throughout apartheid, there were Jews who were involved in the struggle. In the 1980s, there were people who were anti-conscription because all South African men had to actually go into the army. And after apartheid, social entrepreneurs today try to create opportunities for those who are in less privileged positions to, like Jews did, become upwardly mobile themselves. And so you get Jewish social entrepreneurs, Jewish people who fight for justice coming into the system. Cool, so that's just a bit about social justice in South Africa, and one of the organizations, or an umbrella organization, is the Mensch Network. And I was lucky enough to have worked with the person who began the Mensch Network back in 2015, Gina Flash, and basically it connects social entrepreneurs who, let's just say, we have a person who's good with finance and a person who's good with fundraising. in two different social entrepreneurial networks or social entrepreneurial organizations. You can put the two people together and they can get skill sets from each other, their workshops, and it's quite amazing, the social entrepreneurial spirit of South African Jews today. It says through the Liberman doors now, and this is my favorite part of mine, so if you ever come in it, in Cape Town, please God, may COVID end and may you all come to Cape Town. So please enjoy this part. So we've already discussed how the first Jewish mayor, Hyman Liberman, was elected as mayor between 1904 and 1907. His daughter, later on in the 1930s, requested that doors be made in his honor. And these are the doors that they were designed by Herbert Meyerowitz, and they are absolutely magnificent. And I think they tell the story of the Jews coming to Cape Town and actually going everywhere around the world absolutely perfectly. I'm going to start down at the bottom over here. We've got Jews as slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, going up into the Roman times with the burning of the temple, becoming traveling merchants in medieval Europe, going up, you can see that windmill over there, and then becoming migrants from Russia onto a boat, and then making their way to that Cape Dutch house over there. On this side, we've got Babylonian Jews over here playing the lyre and weeping. Remember the thing, if ever I forget thee, Jerusalem, may my right hand lose its cunning. Going up into a more Middle Eastern theme over here, you can see the Byzantine church becoming Russian Orthodox church over there, and again, Russian Jewish immigrants moving on a ship towards that Cape Dutch house. Over here we've got a traditional Xhosa man and woman. Over there, a Cape Malay person carrying grapes, as well as fish representing the Cape. But the reason that I say it's the true South African story is that over here, right in the middle, we've got two men lying on a woman who is nursing her young. And I think it shows just how comfortable, in 1932 at least, when this was actually created, how comfortable Jews felt. Even though they were a minority in South Africa, even though they were Jewish, they still felt comfortable enough to live here. And I think these doors are a sign of that.
Wow, that is stunning. Craig, I'm just chiming in here, only because we know we have 10 minutes left. I wonder if you wanted to say a couple more words or pick out your favorite parts that's left. And then we have not so many, believe it or not, but a few questions that I definitely wanted to make sure we had some time for.
Cool. So let me just, I'd love to play this, but if we don't have time, then let's not do it. Let's
go for it.
Let's go for it. Let's see how it goes. It's fun. It's about devil speak. Behind me is Devil's Peak. If you're coming in from the ocean looking at the iconic Table Mountain scene, it would be on the left of Table Mountain, the other side being Lion's Head. But nobody really knows why it's called Devil's Peak. One of the stories is that there was a governor of the Cape, Governor Van Hunks, and he loved to smoke his pipe, and he often went up Devil's Peak to smoke his pipe. However, one day, a different gentleman came and said, "May I smoke my pipe next to you?" And Governor Van Hunks looked quite bemused and said, "All right, you can come." And the stranger then challenged him to a smoking contest to see who could smoke more than the other. And Van Hunks said, "Cool, let's do it." However, he didn't know that the gentleman, that the stranger was the devil. Obviously, the devil won, On a cloudy day when there's lots of clouds on Devil's Peak, we say that Governor Van Hunks and the devil are having their smoking contest right now. That's just a nice little anecdote. And this is just my last little bit about the Jewish community, and then we'll hopefully have time for questions. So we're outside the Garden Shul, the great synagogue of Cape Town. Once upon a time, before security issues became a problem, these front gates would not be here and the entrance to the Garden Shul would be over here. However, because of security concerns, it's now on the other side. But it still is so beautiful and such an incredible place of worship in Cape Town. And one of the most beautiful shuls, synagogues in the whole of South Africa. It was built in 1905 after the small shul, which is over there, the St. John's Road shul, became too small to fit the growing Jewish community. This became the largest shul in Southern Africa in 1905 when it was opened. And just to remind you, it was opened by Mayor Hyman Liberman in 1905, the same year that City Hall was opened. You can see how the growth of Cape Town comes at the same time as the growth of the Jewish community. However, the gates do open once a year, and when there are weddings in the shul. Obviously during COVID there's nothing that you can do, but when my wife and I got married at this very shul, the gates were opened and it was beautiful. We had our pictures taken over there in the garden, and such a special memory to me. But the reason why I'm speaking about it now is because this still symbolizes Jewish communal life in Cape Town. This big grandiose building shows that we still feel relatively safe here, that we still have a place in South Africa, a place in Cape Town where we can grow as a community. Yes, the community might be dwindling, but we still have a thriving Jewish community. When it comes to the community itself, it's quite an interesting community. And I'm paraphrasing Gidi Shimoni, who's a stalwart of South African history. He now lives in Israel on Kibbutz Torah. He says that we've got a very interesting history because we had Anglo-Jews coming here, and they already had their acculturated understanding of what orthodoxy is from the United Orthodox synagogue structure that they had there. And then when Litvak Jews came here, they had a different understanding because they were Misnagdi Jews, and those were Jews who opposed the sectarian manifestations of Hasidism, which is more... So I'm just going to stop myself there, and I'm just going to say that the South African Jewish experience was the pouring of Litvak spirit into Anglo-Jewish bottles, and also we've become non-observant Orthodox Jews, which is a bit of it's a paradox, but it means that we drive to shul on Shabbos. We don't eat pork, but maybe shellfish here and there. But basically, we have the most incredible community, and we really do have so much to do every single day, and even during COVID. So I had to cut that short because we've only got 5 minutes, and I hope that you enjoyed that presentation. Should I stop sharing now, Danny?
Yeah, that was amazing. I want you to imagine my clapping, in the sense of 500 people, because that's what everyone would be really doing right now if they had their mute button turned on. I'm going to go really fast because there's a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to sum them up because a lot of similar questions, different themes. So first and foremost, we have a lot of people on the call, and it's so amazing to receive this with ancestors from South Africa or family. A lot of people curious about their last names and where they might have come from. Is that okay, Craig, if we perhaps share your email for those people who would like to visit South Africa one day?
Please.
Okay, amazing.
It's Craig. So CRAIG at mothercityjewishtours.com.
I will put that in the chat for everyone to see as well. And the other, a lot of the questions came up. First and foremost, is Garden Shul still Orthodox? And a piggyback on that question is, can you tell us how many other shuls there are in total in Cape Town, and where they get their kosher food from, if they do? Yeah, just a little bit of the update on, Jewish community centers or youth summer camps, all of the stuff that make a community perhaps run today.
So basically, South Africa is a relatively is basically Orthodox in nature. So Orthodox Judaism, like I said, non-observant Orthodox. We do have a progressive community, but that only came into being in the 1920s and is still quite small, but is growing due to intermarriage and people still wanting to be part of the community. And we don't have anything else between progressive and Orthodox Judaism. We've got about, I'd say, about 15 to 20 shuls in Cape Town, which is quite a lot, of various sizes, of various congregation sizes. And we have a lot of kosher food. We have a lot of kosher restaurants, which is amazing for a community of just 14,000. So really, it's a testimony to the communal spirit that Cape Townians really have to uplift the community.
Can you just speak of 14,000 in Cape Town? What about Johannesburg? I know others were curious about the other large city.
So we've got 14,000 in Cape Town, and we've got about 50,000, I'd say, in Johannesburg. So we've got a community of, people say 68, 70,000. That's quite a big, a conservative number would probably be about 65 to 68,000 Jews.
In total, all of South Africa.
Total, yeah.
The other questions that came in, and these are just kind of, like I said, big topics, was wondering if you could speak to any Black Jews who perhaps were coming from other African nations, or perhaps the idea of intermarriage with the Jewish and the Black population. That was one theme. And the other theme, everyone's favorite or not favorite, the question about anti-Semitism today in South Africa.
I'm going to deal with anti-Semitism first because it's an easier answer. So we are probably one of the safest countries in the world in terms of being Jewish, which is quite amazing. I think one of the reasons is because not many people have met a Jew, and so they don't actually know anything about Judaism, to be honest. However, because of the BDS movement and a lot of people saying that that Zionism is apartheid, and there's apartheid Israel, and the very, very fine line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, we are finding a surge of anti-Semitism, especially during the conflict in Gaza in May, which was really, really quite terrible in terms of a rise of anti-Semitic cases, but really it's vastly different. It's really not a lot compared to others, which is other communities in the world, which I find quite amazing. And we have one of the best security organizations, communal security organizations in the world, which get a lot of money to protect Jews, even though there's not that many cases of anti-Semitism. I think it's more about a security thing as being a white South Africans. Black Jews. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that was, you actually answered about 5 or 6 different questions with that, so thank you.
Okay, cool. So with regards to Black Jews, we have a community who come from the north of South Africa, the Lemba, who claim, and people do say that they are they have Jewish heritage, And so they've entered, they've entered the fray of being Jews, although the Orthodox community, which is very conservative, have really not let them join the Orthodox community, but they have been able to join the progressive or reform community. And in terms of intermarriage, it's very difficult to become an Orthodox Jew in South Africa in terms of converting. It takes about 3 years. And even then it's very difficult, whereas with the Reform community, it's much shorter. However, it doesn't mean that it's any lesser, and there are few, but there are only a few Black converts. I can't say it's massive.
Got it.
And also there is something about whiteness in terms of being Jewish, and I think it's a very difficult concept. I think it's a very difficult thing to grasp. Like, I think there's still this conservative nature in terms of white and Black and interracial intermarriage in South Africa.